We would like to remind the viewers that Election Day is Saturday, May 12th. In addition, early voting runs from April 30th to May 8th. Our next round of questions will go to candidates for place 2. Both candidates answered an extensive questionnaire over environmental issues, and our questions tonight are developed to clarify the responses and highlight the differences between the candidates. Each candidate will begin with a 1-minute opening statement. So we're going to start with place 2 incumbent Mike Martinez. Thank you both for joining us. Our first question is on green jobs, and you'll have 2 minutes to respond. We'll move from the audience from left to right, and so we'll begin with you, Councilmember Martinez.
Okay.
You say that if reelected, you would pursue...
He gets 1 minute to introduce himself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's all right.
Introduction time.
Great. Thank you all both for having me and for hosting this event. I am Mike Martinez. I am a 2-term incumbent on the Austin City Council, and I'm running for re-election for a 3rd term. It has been the honor of a lifetime to be an Austin City Council member, and I believe that there are still many things that we can continue to work on that we started in the first 2 terms of our office. I've held very strong positions as it relates to all of our environmental policies, our renewable goals, our zero waste goals. I realize right away, I'll jump out there, I realize that Water Treatment Plant 4 and Formula 1 were environmental issues to the environmental community. I stood strong in supporting moving forward on those projects, but also not before we imparted our environmental values in those decisions that we made as a council. Those are the only 2 things that I think are of question in terms of my environmental commitment. I look forward to the questions tonight.
Thank you. And Laura Presley?
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Presley, and I'm running for City Council Place 2. And I'm an Austinite. I've been here 23 years, and I got my PhD in chemistry from the University of Texas at Austin as a single mother. And I worked 17 years in the semiconductor industry here in Austin, worked at Motorola, Advanced Micro Devices, and Freescale. And one of the things that, with my background, I do really understand the contamination issues from a chemistry standpoint of our environment when there are issues that we cannot fix, or it will take a lot of financial resources to fix. So the best solution is to not contaminate. Also, my background is in photochemistry on metal surfaces, so I really do understand the solar industry and the solar technology, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you guys for having us.
Thank you. Let me borrow that. Thank you. Thank you both for joining us. Our first question is on green jobs, and you'll have 2 minutes to respond. You say that if reelected, I'm sorry, we'll start with Mike Martinez. You say that if reelected, you would pursue a program to raise the rates for trash collection to finance a green job incubator. Mm-hmm. What specifically will each of you do to encourage green jobs, and why is this a priority for you?
Well, it's a priority because that is the future of job creation and economic development for most major cities, but especially cities who consider themselves progressive and forward-thinking. As you've seen in the past, part of our zero waste initiatives, we've created better options for recycling and reduced the amount of solid waste that enters into the landfill by providing cheaper options for smaller containers. I believe that if you still want to use a 90-gallon container and fill it with products that could be recycled, you ought to pay for that because that's working in contra to our goals. If you're willing to pay for that, I think we should take those funds and invest them into an incubator that would help us create and sustain green jobs initiatives moving forward. And that's just one of many proposals where I think we can create sustainable green jobs. The other is, I believe, in the area of our community gardens. We need to maximize what's happening in our community gardens so that we can buy food locally, sell it locally, and turn that into a thriving economy.
Okay. And Laura Presley, what will you do to encourage green job development?
That's a great question. I think that we need to invest in our local small businesses and our local economy here. I've spoken out against the subsidies that we've been giving to large corporations, Apple Corporation. I've spoken out against the subsidy to the Marriott Hotel and also the Formula One. If we invest those dollars in our local businesses, it is a huge impact. And we could support a solar industry in Austin, recycling jobs that, you know, we have the zero waste goals. Those are just opportunities for more small businesses businesses and jobs in Austin, and also composting. All of these are just ripe opportunities for small business, and I would invest those dollars in our small businesses versus local, versus these large corporations that don't need our money.
Okay, for our second question, Dr. Presley, you will start, and you'll both have 2 minutes to respond. The question concerns the drought. Last summer, Austin had 90 days over 100 degrees. Despite the wet winter, the Texas state climatologist predicts several more years of drought. Some scientists suggest that we are experiencing the beginning of a longer-term desertification in central Texas. Meanwhile, the Austin area is reported to be the second fastest growing region in the country. How do you reconcile these two trends? And if elected, what policies would you initiate to deal with them?
Yes, we've also spoken out against the Water Treatment Plant 4, which, we're going to have an issue with the drought, having any water in the lake with regard to that. So I think that we have to conserve our water. This is the critical answer, and it's an obvious answer. We cannot continue to use the water that we are at the levels that we've been using, and irrigation is one of the key components, the largest component of where our water is going. I think we have to encourage different types of landscaping for Austinites and educate people on the waste that your landscaping really causes. So I think also when it does rain in Austin, in our area, I think rainwater capture is really important, especially for areas that are not recharge zones. And I think people can conserve water by collecting their own rainwater. I have a water collection system for my organic garden at my home, and my garden loves rainwater over and above tap. So I think the rainwater capture and conservation are the most important things. Okay. Yeah.
Councilmember Martinez, how do you reconcile these trends of drought and growth, and what do you propose to deal with them?
Well, we've already started some of the reconciling by actually talking, not just talking, but putting groups together and having discussions as to whether or not we ratchet up our conservation measures in a much quicker time frame. As long as the drought continues, obviously we're going to have to do more on the conservation side. I've been proud to lead in the efforts to create our conservation program and to help citizens understand how we achieve that. But at the same time, it's turning into an economic situation. When you look at commercial properties and when you look at home developers, they're also understanding that the long-term sustainability and impact on their products is directly affected by water conservation and a drought. So educating them about different landscapes that don't consume as much water. Also moving forward with an alternative proposal for watering. 1 day a week or 2 days a week really isn't the best policy. Yes, initially it creates a spike in conservation, but then it starts to wane over time. There's technology available to us today that would allow you to water based on volumetric charging and a specific volume. I believe that is the method to go. If you go outside of that volume, you're hit with a penalty that is so severe that there are negative consequences for you not abiding by that. That would allow you to water either every other day or every day, depending on the need and the moisture content of the soil and the landscape that you choose. Those are the smart technology programs that I think are going to help us achieve all of our conservation methods moving forward and help us reconcile what we see as an alarming trend for drought and water consumption moving forward.
Well, this is the kind of information Austinites need to make good decisions for City Council members, and we thank you. If you're just tuning in, you're watching the 2012 Green Forum and for the Austin City Council candidates, and we're on Channel Austin's Channel 10 and streaming live on channelaustin.org. Now let's look at density and development. You'll have 2 minutes to respond, and we'll start with you, Councilmember Martinez. The two of you seem to have different opinions when it comes to density and development. Councilmember Martinez says he has supported density in the central in the central city as well as along our core transit corridors. And Dr. Presley says there are a lot of economic and political pressures to build and densify many areas of Austin, and that this potentially challenges the balance of our natural environment and limits of our infrastructure. Generally speaking, what will you both do to encourage density and the appropriate infrastructure and investment to support that?
I was going to say encourage or discourage.
Encourage or discourage. Good addition. What will you do to encourage or discourage density?
Great question. I absolutely have supported urban densification. I believe it is the most sustainable and smartest way to go to grow as an environmental community. There couldn't be any more of a strain on infrastructure than sprawl. There couldn't be any more strain on our roadways, on our air quality, on our water quality than sprawl. I realize that people want to make a personal decision and don't want to live in the urban core. That's why we should have a regional approach as well to our growth. Our growth concepts shouldn't be based in just intersections and nodes within the urban core. We should start looking to our regional government areas and our regional communities and asking them to join with us in planning for what we know is going to be future growth here in Austin. So things like Manor and Elgin, cities like Manor and Elgin and Hutto, those can be regional growth centers. As we're seeing in today's comp plan, we're looking at just the city of Austin, and we're picking 183 in Lamar as a potential future regional growth center. I think that's appropriate. I think that's necessary, but we need to think beyond our city limits so that we can handle this unprecedented growth that's coming and still maintain our commitments to the environment. I will continue to support urban densification. I will continue to discourage sprawl, supporting open space acquisitions in our environmental sensitive areas so that we can encourage the growth and development in the areas that we believe are less environmentally sensitive, such as East Austin and along the 130 corridor.
And Laura Presley, what will you do to encourage or discourage density?
So I think the biggest issue right now is our resources. Water resources for an influx of more population into Austin. We are almost at a breaking point, especially with the drought that we just talked about a few seconds ago. And my belief is growth should pay for itself. We are subsidizing growth in Austin. Our tax dollars are giving breaks to water hookups, to developments, and I do not agree with that. Do not support that. Growth is not paying for itself. We're paying for it as citizens for more people to come here. So I have a real big issue with that. I think growth should be natural and not subsidized by the city. When I've had a couple people tell me this, and it's a really interesting statement, that developers are mining Austin instead of it being a natural progression. We have developers that come into Austin. We have this huge growth. I'll give you an example. South Lamar is a huge example. And the Zilker neighborhood down there is really frustrated, fought the upzoning of these more dense areas of South Lamar. And we get stuck with the traffic. So we have this, and we really don't know how to deal with it. We don't have traffic solutions. We don't have traffic strategies or plans. So I believe in growth, but it should be natural. It should not be something that the citizens of Austin are paying for so the developers can make more money, and it's an unnatural growth. So those are my concerns. Yeah, and so I would back off on the subsidies. Yes.
Okay. Our fourth and final question concerns zero waste, and again, the response time is 2 minutes. On the topic of zero waste, Councilmember Martinez suggests that a single-use bag ban is a model we should replicate when it comes to dealing with problem materials such as styrofoam and other problem materials, while Dr. Presley seems to favor customer and market force-driven initiatives. How will you specifically deal with the problem materials, and when are outright bans called for?
Well, I think they're...
I'm sorry, I didn't say this, but we'll begin with Dr. Presley.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry.
I look at the bag ban. It went on for 5 years, and there were some things that I probably would have done differently with that to encourage the goal of hitting 50% before we implemented the ban. And I think market forces, education is critical, and I think the City Council, as a leader, can set the expectation and set the behaviors for their own contracts. So the city has multiple contracts with different businesses, and if we want to, on the outset, if we want to say styrofoam or other problematic materials or something we don't want, then the city should have ordinances with, not ordinances, but resolutions for themselves that they do not purchase these products. And what they do, the council would be a leader and not just setting an ordinance and it being I think we have to take a leadership role. That's the first step. That's how we do it different. And I think for the bag ban, it would have been interesting if, 5 years ago, we had said, Home Depot was one of and Lowe's were one of the two of the companies that would not get on board with the bag ban. You've got Whole Foods that did a really good job. You have Natural Grocers that did an excellent job, and they helped us reduce to that 23% that we did hit. What I would have done on the council says, you know what, Home Depot, you get a $4 million contract. from us as the city. If you don't reduce your bags, you get cut off from that. And I would set that as the city would be a leader and set the example for the community before you go into an ordinance. That's how I would do it.
Okay. And Councilmember, how would you deal with problem materials?
I think true leadership is actually taking a position and looking your friends straight in the face who are your supporters and saying, I'm sorry, the product that you're putting out is bad for the environment, is against all of our zero waste goals, against all of our environmental principles, and I'm going to be supporting a measure that could be financially detrimental to you, but not to the extent to where I think it's going to crush your business, but to the extent to where you're going to meet our values if you're going to operate in our community. It's no different than any other ordinance we adopt. We are always debating ordinance, and we are always adopting ordinances that we believe are in the best interests of all Austinites and all of our values. My opponent at one candidate forum literally called the bag ban ridiculous in that it would take public safety police officers away from their jobs to police a bag ban. These are the kinds of thoughts and notions that don't show leadership. It takes a council member that's willing to take those products, those manufacturers of those products, look those companies in the face. And what we did was in 2008, we said, work with us. Work with us to help reduce the consumption of plastic bags. They did. And initially, we did achieve a nominal rate of a reduction in use of plastic bags. But what we saw over time was natural habits went back to the way they were. But I was the first council member to stand strong in 2008 and say I was ready to enact a full ban on this product because I believed it was only hurting the goals that we had set as a council. I'll continue to do that in my next term in office.
Okay. Well, thank you both. We have time for one more question, and we're going to go ahead and start with Councilmember Martinez for this one. Both of you support getting the city divested from the Fayette coal plant, but Dr. Presley goes a step further and says that she supports an audit of the South Texas nuclear project. Should that be nuclear? And indicates a desire to get away from nuclear power. What role do you see for nuclear power in the city's future? Mr. Martinez.
Well, as long as it's as safe as it has been for what we own today, I think we need to continue considering nuke as a baseload option. It is the cheapest supply of power that we have. I absolutely agree and understand all of the environmental considerations around nuke. We as a council have stated in a policy that we would no longer increase our purchase of nuclear power. But you can't reduce yourself off of coal as a baseload support and say you're going to reduce yourself off of nuke at the same time. You can, but you have to be forthright with the customers and tell them how much it's going to cost them. And the bottom line is it would be astronomically impactful to our utility customers if we were to lose those two baseload supplies. I believe that we should get out of Fayette altogether, but I've qualified that commitment to say I don't think we should just sell our portion of Fayette and let somebody else keep polluting the air. We need a long-term strategy that divests ourselves from Fayette, but also pulls Fayette completely offline so that it doesn't have the degradation of air quality that it currently has on an impact to Austin.
Okay. And Dr. Presley, what do you see as the role for nuclear power in the city's future?
Okay, good question. I want to respond to the bag ban comment that my opponent made. I never said it was ridiculous. There was a discussion we had about in East Austin that someone's family member had gotten bit by a crack addict, and how do we balance police in East Austin versus implementing and holding businesses accountable for the bag ban. I never said it was ridiculous, and I don't believe that. With regard to nuclear energy, big problems with nuclear energy are that if you have a disaster and you have an accident, you can't recall that from the environment. There are issues, environmental issues, that you can spend money on, and you can, they may be expensive, but you can fix them and you can correct them and you can clean them up. Nuclear energy and nuclear energy disasters are a big issue. And so I would love to see us out of the nuclear energy business because of those issues. And as a council member, I would like to do an audit of the South Texas nuclear power plant and see what, and I know they've been shut down for a period of time, what are the issues, what's going on down there, and finding out, do they have FMEAs, failure modes effects analysis, studies and data that shows what their risks are and how they're mitigating those. So that's what I would do with nuclear energy.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Presley and Councilmember Martinez, for joining us and taking the time to educate Austin voters about your positions on environmental issues. We'd like to remind our viewers that early voting begins April 30th and runs through May 8th. When we come back from the break, we'll be joined by candidates for mayor, so please stay with us.